please, if you don't want to be recorded, please keep your video off. So Red Dot Foundation works on gender justice and equality. Our Safe City reporting platform encourages anonymous reporting of sexual and gender-based violence and is the largest crowd map on this issue. Today, we will be sharing insights from our latest social audit commissioned by Vital Voices under the US State Department's Voices Against Violence program, and then we will follow it with a panel discussion. So without further ado, I'm just going to launch the social audit. So we, over the COVID period, did an online social audit. It was never meant to be an online survey, but it happened to be such because of the circumstances. And we reached out to 500 people, but 302 finally took it. They were mainly from urban areas because the point of this social audit was twofold. One was to understand how people use digital and would they use it for reporting of sexual and gender-based violence. So therefore, we reached out mainly to females, 73% were female, from the cities of Mumbai, Bangalore, Delhi, and others. Most of them, I think all of them were educated and literate, so they're most likely to use an app. And many of them were employed in a company, 26% was self-employed, and then there were some who were students. And they were from diverse age groups, so there was a healthy mix, not only of young people, but also older people. And it was really interesting what these surveys showed. So one was there was poor understanding of sexual violence as a terminology. So it was well recognized, but the nuances were not clearly understood, like what constitutes sexual violence. Most of the people understood it to be rape or domestic violence. And all the other forms of it, like verbal, non-verbal forms of it, were loosely termed as eve teasing, which is a common term in India, and therefore normalizes it, like as though we should accept it. Many did not consider this to be violence, and many did not know about the Indian laws on sexual harassment. And the quantitative surveys, unprompted, the people taking the survey were able to identify the different forms of sexual violence. What was most interesting was if we asked them if they experienced it directly, 51% said no, and 48% said yes. And what did they see, or what kinds they saw, were mainly street harassment, followed by pinching, touching, groping. And then we had making passes, commenting, whistling, staring, followed by obscene gestures and stalking. And where did they witness it? Mainly in public spaces, 71%, or near the corner of somebody's residence or apartment building, which corresponds to the study done by the Royal Institute of Technology, Stockholm, that says a woman is more likely to be raped between the 500 meters from her door to her bus stop. There's food stalls also that where they were experiencing sexual violence. What was their reasoning why they were sexually harassed? It was, strong sexual urges by men, but the number one was to show power and control, or the toxic masculinity and bullying. Also, a high amount of respondents said taking revenge of some kind. And what was the effect? The effect was it affects mental health. People felt unsafe, afraid, embarrassed, and humiliated. It leads to depression and suicidal thoughts. And of course, they avoided going out and avoiding.
Excuse me.
Could I ask everyone to please mute themselves so that we can all hear each other clearly? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the presentation. Okay. So these are not surprising, but yet it was validating in a way. What did they do? Most of them tried to fight back over the support of friends and bystanders, but a lot of them also just ignored it, which means that there needs to be some kind of education around it. And then some approached legal entities like the police and government authorities. Who did they go to after they experienced it? 80% went to a family member or friend, which is interesting because Napinai has an initiative called Cyber Sathi, and Sathi means friend. And her idea is that we should train people to be first responders, because somebody we know is likely to come to us asking for help and we won't be able to help them. And what was the responses? Of course, 81% felt shame, guilt. No, why did they not report? 81% said because they were feeling a sense of shame, or they would bring dishonor to their family, followed by fear of the future. And this has happened in my team as well, where unmarried young girls don't really report because then they feel that their parents will not support their parents would not support them going to the police to make that complaint, just because they would not then be of marriageable material. Of course, there was a high case of feeling of hopelessness, not getting justice, fear of stigmatization, insensitivity of the justice system, including the police, was also very highly reported. And who do they go to report first? So the first was NGOs over the police, which was, also interesting. And would they use technology? In many cases, the awareness of technology was poor. So 70% were not aware of the various apps, including ours. But if they knew about it, they were very willing to report, and that was 75%, which makes a case for technology as a reporting tool. What kind of technology would they use? Mobile apps over the website, which also was interesting. And when asked what are the different forms of safety apps that they are aware of, many of them spoke about vSafe, which was 30% of the respondents. But interestingly, vSafe doesn't exist anymore. So even technology apps have a life cycle. So a lot of them, all the big brands that they were that was listed actually don't exist. So the conclusion of this survey was quite interesting. What it says is that the availability of tech applications continues to be underutilized. It appeals to the young people, and therefore, there is a case for our reporting platform, Safe City. It is essential for the community and allows them to anonymously report. Overall, the data indicates that there is a lack of knowledge of various acts of sexual violence, as well as the laws and what action to take when witnessing or observing sexual violence and reporting. This makes a case for more investment in education as a preventative tool. And we find that there is actually very, donors are reluctant to invest in this. In fact, donors are also reluctant to invest in the tech. So especially when it comes from the global south. It also highlights a lack of knowledge of apps and tech that can assist in various acts in reporting of sexual violence. What has worked and generated the reports is the community-based programs. So, and that validates our belief that you can't just put tech out there, you have to complement it with community-based programming, and that definitely has yielded results. And programs like Safe Campus or Rise Up that we have conducted and facilitated in college campuses or in communities has definitely assisted in raising awareness. So that is the results of our social audit, and I hope it sets the context for our discussion today with our guest. So before I'm just going to go to gallery view, and again, welcome everyone. And if you missed the beginning, please use the chat section to introduce yourself, tell us who you are, where you're from, and we will try to make this as interactive as possible. So I'm going to invite Lauren first to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her work. And also, when you saw the statistics about low trust with the police, how can we bridge that in this digital age?
Thank you, Elsa. And you froze there for a minute, so I will just run with it. We're good to go. So I spent nearly 30 years with the FBI, working both in the US and internationally in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Technology was an ever-present and critical component of the work we did. I had the opportunity to deploy some of the most advanced technologies in national security and criminal investigations. Toward the latter years of my career, virtually every investigation had a cyber component. I know the incredible power of technology, and I'm also aware of the power in misusing technology. And I know how it feels to be the only woman in the room. Earlier in my career, I sometimes found it intimidating, but I embraced it and found being the only woman in the room to be energizing and empowering because my voice was like no other in that room. I now sit in a unique intersection of having national security, law enforcement, and diplomacy expertise that cross-pollinates with a depth in international women's issues, including advising and mentoring women in areas of conflict. I've worked on 6 continents with governments, international organizations, NGOs, academia, corporations, and civil society, and provided programming in countries as diverse as Qatar, Turkey, Argentina, India, Pakistan, and Egypt. Much of it focused on the need for diversity in rule of law institutions and the incredible power that can be harnessed by pairing civil society with the private sector and government. As a judge for the Women's Safety X Prize, I assessed submissions from around the world, which focused on creating a solution in the form of a device, either wearable or portable, that would allow women and girls to signal instantly if they felt unsafe to a small identified community of support, family, friends, advocacy organizations, and police. I dedicate a considerable portion of my time to mentoring and collaborating with youth. As I see it, making our nations and communities safer is dependent on involving and listening to all voices. Governments don't have all the answers, nor do we have all the answers. We must continue to raise our voices and ideas as women, but we need to simultaneously be helping to develop the boys and young men in our lives and identifying men who will be our allies. They're there. We need to find them and enlist them if safety, security, and gender justice is to be a reality and not just a concept for discussion. And I'm delighted to be here today. So thank you, Elsa, so much for including me.
Thanks, Lauren. And you raise a great point on engaging men and boys, and we'll come to that in a moment. I would like to call on Napinai. She's a Supreme Court advocate and the founder of CyberSathi. And Napinai, you would have seen that there is a great dependency on going first to somebody known to you, a family or a friend. And that is also your philosophy by, for training people to be first responders on responding to online harassment and, providing legal recourse. So can you share a little bit about your work and why you think it's important?
Thank you, Elsa. It's such a wonderful platform to give voice to some of our concerns and also our thoughts to take it forward. So I started practice as a criminal lawyer. And from criminal law to cyber laws, one thing, the commonality which I've seen is the first responder is always a friend, because most of the victims are scared of authority figures, and that invariably rules out either the school, college, or office, or any of the formal places of engagement that they could otherwise reach out to. If they are scared of authority, they're petrified of their parents or immediate family, if the victim is an adult. So ultimately, it all then boils down to that friend, that confidant whom they are willing to reach out to. And that was, as you rightly said, the philosophy behind CyberSathi. I realized from the time when I started specializing in cyber laws and then focused a lot on cyber crimes, including teaching police or judiciary, even amongst the police or judiciary. So within the system also, I realized that ultimately trust is the factor which works in terms of what they accept, when you speak to them, or what they don't. Similarly, I realized that for the system to function effectively, The victims, who are the real stakeholders for the system, need to know what their rights are, what their remedies are, how are the laws applied, and get courage from it to utilize the system. You mentioned about the trust in police. Today in India, we have a trust deficit with anything that's systemic. So the whole idea was to create the trust, to encourage people to utilize systems, and and through that improve the systems. That's what Cyber Sati was all about. So it's kind of like something that brings together what I've done with 31 almost completed 30 years now. So nearly 31 years of practice as a lawyer, plus what I have learned in terms of practical experience, including in working on cybercrime cases and also with the system. So that's what I tried to bring together to create a platform for enabling and empowering victims. See, we have seen there can be laws, there can be more addition of laws. That's not going to help anybody. We need better enforcement. And for better enforcement to happen, victims have to know what their rights are, and they have to know how to go about their rights. Getting frustrated with the system, getting angry with the system is not going to help anybody, least of all the victims. So knowing, using that knowledge in an effective manner, and ensuring that they approach the system in the correct way so that the system can also in turn help them is my utopian vision, not just for Cyber Sati, but for all the initiatives that I undertake with respect to law.
Thank you for that, Napinai. And I know you're very passionate about working within the system and strengthening the system. So, and in India, we have a law for everything, but the understanding and the implementation of the law is a problem. So thank you for that. And we'll come to that, further discussion on those aspects in a moment. Over to you, Beatrice. You are working towards giving women a political voice and agency. Can you share a bit about your work?
Yes, thank you. And well, I have another perspective in which one I want to give you all. And I want to say good morning, first of all, and good afternoon and good night for everybody who is here from all the world. And to thank you, the Gender Alliance in ELSA, for holding this event and invite me to share this space with such a great woman. I'm very pleased. And let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Beatriz. I'm co-founder of Update Institute, an organization here in Latin America that is study and foster political innovation through storytelling, technology, training. And our main objective is to reduce political inequality. And women, of course, is one of the groups that is always in the margins of the political system. And we are working especially to give visibility to the political imagination that women can produce when they are elected. When they are elected and when they have power and conscious of the role that they have to increase women's rights. At the same time, we are working also and giving women support through the election and campaign process, because we need to sustain also this path, and then we develop technology to help to create community around her candidacy. Sorry, sometimes my pronunciation it's not very good, but also through the social media and train the chief of staff to increase their chances of being elected, because we do understand that we need women elected in order to change things. As Lauren was saying, she was the only one in the room, and this is very common in public spaces. It's more and more increasing, more women in public spaces and making public decisions. But we still are very few, and it's very hard to get there. So because of this, we launched last year a study in a web series where we interview more than 100 elected women in the region, from the legislative, executive, local leaders, national leaders around the region, in Brazil, Argentina, Bolivia, Mexico, Colombia, and Chile. And our aim was to understand what was the potential and the challenges of this woman in power. And one of the biggest challenges we face is the biggest challenge we face is, in order to foster women in power, is no doubt the importance of changing culture. And culture is connected with the stories that shape our behavior. And this is where we were very concerned about it. How can we change the behavior? And I'm sure this is no surprise for you all. But we must not forget that we can change laws, we can create technology, we can change institutions, but if we don't change the culture, the imaginary of the system will easily recreate strategies to maintain power. This is very kind of frustrating because, for example, in Bolivia, the most parity-oriented country in Latin America, and one of the, I think, the most parity-oriented country in the world, they even have one law that criminalizes gender-based violence, but it's still, politics are not a safe space for women. For example, most of them who are elected do not pursue re-election after, and they even, sometimes most of them even can finish their mandate. So why that happens? Because law is not enough. Technology is not only enough. Is important, of course, it's crucial, yes. But we need to the civil society be all the time organized and be bound with the institutions and the changes, and be organized and non-stop support non-stop. And well, in other words, we need to recode the system, and we can do that from small acts and big acts. But I will stop here, and I can share my stories. Have two stories to share with you, but I can share a little bit later, so I cannot be like speaking non-stop.
No problem. I am trying to pin Napinai, but I think Napinai, because you are on the phone. Okay, let's see. Okay, great. So we have all 4 speakers here, including me. So, when we talk about the socio-cultural norms and, trying to change that came up in our social audit as well, one of the barriers to reporting. But Lauren, you have a wealth of experience being in a man's world. You were one of the first women on the FBI SWAT team. You were working on digital before it became fashionable, So, and the future is digital. So what is the nature of security concerns that we should expect, and how is that going to affect women? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Anyway, as I was saying, Elsa, that is a great question. And for me, when I consider security concerns for everyone, of course, women are included in that, it includes access itself. When we're talking about the digital world and, the entire internet, access is a problem because it's inequitable right now, both inequity in terms of accessing digital communications and the infrastructure. For example, one of the things we've seen with the pandemic that we have all been living for the past year is large geographic areas and communities in many countries in the world still have no access or insufficient access to broadband and networks. In fact, there's still large segments of the world that are functioning in a 2G world, while a lot of the developed world is at the 5G level. And this is even more pronounced for the migrant, refugee, and internally displaced communities. And they are at considerable risk of being victims of crimes, including sexual assault and trafficking. Women, children, the disabled, and members of the LGBTQ community are disproportionately impacted. And one of the other problems with this is that in many countries, and I'm sure I know some of the women on our panel, including you, Elsa, as well as others that are participating, understand that in many countries and communities, women's access to digital communications is limited or prohibited. And so gaining access to mobile devices becomes a problem, and that impacts a woman's security. In many places, the men and boys will get the mobile devices and not the women, and that impacts safety, security, education, and economic potential. And something that Napane touched on, and that is looking at the frameworks that exist from a policy, institutional, and legal standpoint. And yes, there's an issue with regard to enforcement, but the bigger issue is a failure to implement what's there, number one, and two, to have good communications between civil society and our government institutions, including the police. So for me, looking at that angle of it, also as Napane mentioned, the trust deficit is huge, but we can't point at the other and say that person has to fix that because it's impacting my security. We each have to take a personal responsibility to say, okay, I'm going to step up and do what I can do to make this a better relationship. So I'm looking at that security from a much broader level. So I welcome everybody else's input on that.
Yeah, and it's true, you know, I mean, when I started off the findings of the social audit, I did say that we went in straight for those people who have access, right? But access is a huge, it's a huge deal. There's a digital divide in our country. People may not have access to a device, they may not have access to the internet itself, and they may not be literate as well. And therefore, when you think of technology, you have to think of various different forms of technology. So one of the most successful ones was with our partner Jane in Kibera, which we then adopted in India as well, where she's put boxes in several locations. People put paper notes, and then she uploads it into our system and we digitize her data. In India, we also have a missed call. So a missed call is you call a number, it gets disconnected, and we call you back. And those are ways to think about how do you still include people and not leave them out of this system that you're trying to create. But I want to come to Napinai. So when we're thinking of systems and, you don't want to, like, you're a proponent of fixing the system, not creating parallel systems. And in India, for example, when it comes to online reporting, our government has an online portal where you can report, right? And that was something that you were instrumental in bringing. Can you share how technology can be an enabler in such cases?
Absolutely. In fact, you're a living example of how technology can be an enabler, because Safe Cities as an app itself has created so much of a difference. So that I want to actually start off with that, because some of the smallest of initiatives may have the largest impact because of its reach and its efficacy. With respect to the online portal and the use of technology to protect against crime. So this is something, again, as you rightly said, I am an optimist. I still believe that the system can be fixed. But more importantly, I believe the system has to be fixed because there is no choice. A system is by its very definition something that we have not just created, but we have acceded to. And if we don't make a system work, then who will, right? So anyway, there was this case before the Supreme Court, which was initiated because rape and gang rape videos were being uploaded online. It is as horrific as that, when it comes to offenses against women. And they were unable to take down the content. So the Supreme Court took it up as a suo motu writ petition and registered it. And it started in 2015. In February 2017, I was appointed as amicus in the matter. See, again, I told you, it's always the friend who comes in handy, and amicus curiae is the friend of the court. So, and around that time, the issues of child sexual abuse content online was also made part of the scope of the matter. And a government committee was appointed. One of the ideas I had mooted even during the hearing was the use of artificial intelligence to root out content like this at the stage of upload itself, because every jurisdiction has a timeline within which the content is supposed to be removed. As of now, Australia probably has one of the shortest timelines of 24 hours for what they all has abhorrent sexual content to be removed. So in India, it's 36 hours. The whole idea was in 36 hours, the victim is victimized so many more, and the solution would lie in stopping such kind of actions being committed. Even for remedies thereafter, it was not very effective because there was, again, the whole issue, the trust deficit we spoke about, the complications in terms of giving complaints, etc. So one of the most important developments that came from this case was the Ministry of Home Affairs, the Indian Ministry of Home Affairs, set up a portal, cybercrime.gov.in. So any victim can submit a complaint from their homes. They don't have to worry about choosing the right police station, the right jurisdiction, etc. Each of which were things where victims were made to run from pillar to post earlier. Now it becomes the responsibility of MHA to allocate the complaint to the right place. So it takes some time. It's a longer process than if you go physically to the police station. But because you're giving it online, there is accountability and transparency. So because of this, here is one step forward in making sure that the system actually works. The second thing that happened was there were a lot of, this entire case was on consensus. So it was not adversarial. All the technology companies, be they search engines or content hosting platforms, are party in this matter. And all of them agreed as a consensus proposal, a few things, about 12 and a half to be very precise. These were captured as part of an order passed by the Supreme Court in 2017. And in February 2021, the Indian government has brought in intermediary guidelines in which also some of these proposals have been captured. And in that, one part of it was acceded to by the represented companies, which is that they will develop artificial intelligence technology. They did not agree to the deployment of it for rooting out crimes like this. But this part of this use of automated technology to stave off uploading of this kind of content like rape and gang rape videos or child sexual abuse content as a voluntary measure is now part of the intermediary guidelines. So we've seen a lot of progress, and this is, this case is a classic example of how with cooperation and with, moving in a non-adversarial manner, you can actually bring about so much change, and so many changes that happened had global impact. For instance, earlier there were, in many of the platforms, they did not have a separate button to report child sexual abuse content. When you have it seems like such a simple thing, but look at the impact of it. When you add a specific button, considering the criminality involved and the compliance necessary from each platform, the minute the correct button is chosen, immediate takedowns happen. And that was one more thing which happened because of this case. Many platforms introduced specific reporting mechanisms for child sexual abuse content and violent imagery against women, etc. So finally, I wanted to close out with something which you were part of, Elsa, instrumentally. In fact, you were not part of, you initiated it. The domestic violence public interest litigation which you filed before the Supreme Court. I still believe Safe City may be one of the solutions you can look at. So we talked about the lack of internet connectivity and how women therefore do not have a level playing field. One of the grounds you had raised in your petition also was this, that if online solutions are being provided for offenses against women, and if women do not have access to online spaces, then they are being deprived of an opportunity to avail of systems and remedies within it. So I really do hope that Safe City will expand itself further to protect or to provide alternatives for not just cybercrime victims, but all kinds of violence or offenses against women and children.
Thank you for sharing that. And the social audit also showed that we self-censure, we limit our own opportunities, we restrict ourselves, we restrict our movements, and thereby, it affects our financial independence in the long run. As you know, and maybe people don't know about it, that India has this unique problem where we have the most number of graduates at any point in our history, but the lowest number of women participating formally in the labor force. Year on year, it's decreasing. And one of the reasons that the McKinsey study says is the perception of the lack of safety in public spaces and on transportation. That's another topic for another day. We need a whole 1 hour for that. But I wanted to ask Beatrice, since you work specifically on political leadership of women and agency, and we know that, you know, these socio-cultural factors that adversely harm women in the physical world gets translated in the virtual world as well. We've seen that with elections where women candidates get more of a backlash. They're constantly being compared, you know, their voices are made fun of. I mean, we are different from men, so our voices may be higher pitched, you know. We may be a little more high strung and emotional. I was accused of being emotional when I was in corporate, but that doesn't mean that, you know, I'm not a good leader. So anyway, so when your constituency or your community faces this extreme backlash, rape threats, because it's easier to make these threats online than actually saying it face to face on, you know, to a person. Do you train these women how to respond and not and ignore it, because they can be highly damaging emotionally and mentally?
Yeah. Yes, so in update we have, but I just want to react about what Napai was saying, that here in Brazil and in Latin America, also what we have, this is it's a problem. You create policies, technology to address the problems, but the institutions are not ready to address it. So it's very, very common here in Brazil. You have a policy station only for women, for example, that to denounce sexual harassment and abuse and all that. But and the ones who receive the police station, they are all made by women. But if a woman is raped and goes to a police station and she's attended, and a man is taking the denounce, most of the time they suffer more violence than they are doubted. It's a terrible system. So if you don't have, that is my point of view, if you don't have women, and not women, I'm not saying just women, because we need to give to the whole public sector a gender perspective. In Argentina, I don't know if you know that, but in Argentina they passed a law 2 years ago that every public servant, once you're a public servant, you need to receive a gender perspective course. It's like that. It's like you go to like a school of what it is to be a woman in the society, what it is, the gender issues. So that is very interesting. Even the president recently elected, Alberto Fernandez, he went to this course because he also needs to have gender perspective. So this is very important. So we need to also create an environment that can really support the gender justice. Otherwise, we're going to create policies, we're going to create great and magical technologies, but it's not penetrating the system. Because the system, as I said, it's created to maintain power. So, in my opinion, the only way, in our opinion, in Institute Update, not the only way, but one way, very effective, is to bring more women into the public decision processes as public servants, as agents, as politicians, presidents. You name it. We need parity, and we need not only parity as women. We need women with consciences, gender consciences, because here in Brazil and in Latin America, we have women who is elected, but they just serve to the same hole, the politician traditional hole. So in Update, what we do is we train. So we use technology. Actually, the technology that we created is the technology that is used in the campaigns, election campaigns, with the rich campaigns, that they have a lot of money. They buy technologies to reach people. So we created an open source technology to help women to create their community during the elections, and to address their messages to their public, and because they don't have access. When a woman decided to go to politics, it's like going to a war, and it's really a war. It's like it's terrible. If they lose, they are like very psychologically damaged, because they suffer violence, psychological violence, they suffer physical violence, sometimes sexual harassment. It's like, it's terrible. So if they lose, they also have this feeling of losing, and also with all this baggage of negative baggages. So we need to take care of this woman, because we don't want to lose anyone in the process. So it's going to war. And when this woman is elected, wow, the war is there. So you enter into the war, like you are, they don't let you speak. They are all the time trying to make you feel uncomfortable, insecure, inadequate. So we need to prepare women to understand that we are facing that. I'm not gonna say, oh, you're gonna go to politics and everything's gonna be like just very, very beautiful, a paradise. No. So if we need to prepare these women psychologically to what they're gonna encounter in the public arena. And this is very, very, very important. So when we created the training, we created technology to address the message, but the main technology we created was the training. A training created specifically to women who is running for office. So we give psychological support. We help them to understand what kind of networks they need to create to sustain her power, to sustain her life during the campaign, because she's a mother, she's someone's daughter, she's taking care of a lot of people. So we need to create a space that she can be well assisted, and the other people who she's taking care of is also assisted. So and also psychological help for example, during the campaign, because of all this violence that like they feel very like they don't feel they are ready to go to run for office. And also especially how they can take care of themselves digitally, because as you said, is the first way to is the easy way to attack a woman by internet and everything. So we create this, how to create your digital space safe, because they don't know that actually, like they just don't know that they need to cryptography, I don't know, to crypto their passwords and how to behave in the internet. People think the internet is like a safe space. Is like, no, it's not safe space. So we need to help them.
Yeah. So I want to, share with everyone that Napanai and our organization are actually doing digital rights training for 6,000 young people, simply because there's so much to learn on, how do you stay safe, what are your remedial measures, but also all the different forms of crime that can happen in a digital space. And I'd encourage everyone to put your questions in the chat section, but I'm going to take Manaswini's question. And the other one before that. So we reached out to 500 people. This audit was done in the midst of the pandemic, and a lot of people, unfortunately, were not online. And so they may have been missed out. Of course, as I said, this was the social audit that was specific to digital rights and how people use technology. And so, we couldn't do physical focus groups, discussions, and stuff like that. But it was also important for us to collect this data and go ahead with the survey, simply because we were using the pandemic to upgrade our whole system and use some of these insights to improve our app, which we did. The second one is our on-ground work outside of the pandemic is actually in the communities. And over there, what we've noticed is that a woman may not necessarily have her own device. She may use her husband's mobile phone, or there may be one phone for the entire family. So in that case, they have limited access in terms of time. So if you want to connect with them, maybe it's at 6 p.m. in the evening. Or in some cases where we worked, we've also appointed one person in the community who might be responsible to upload the data. We work with community-based nonprofits, and they are the ones who would drive this in their community. So some people might go into their office and use the computer over there. So there are multiple ways, and we believe that technology should not be the barrier. I'm going to see if there's a question. So I've also put the Safe City YouTube channel, because just this week I have done more than 5 panel discussions on this very same topic of the use of tech and data to address gender-based violence, and the speakers have all been different and the conversations have been completely different. So I would encourage you to check our Safe City YouTube channel to maybe listen to some of those other conversations, to see what you can learn from there. But it is a huge topic and we are starting to understand it. So Anastasia says, all participants are women, yes, but they're all diverse women from different parts of the world, different ethnicities and different backgrounds. And this was the Commission for the Status of Women. So, I thought it was nice to have a female panel for a change. So why is it still difficult to involve men in discussions of GBV? It is a real issue, and that's why we had this this conversation at Men Engages Ubuntu Symposium as well. We've had this at various colleges with police chiefs who are mainly men. And we've also had it in highly tech conferences, like Pure Tech, where most of the technologists are men. So like I said, we have had the same discussion in different places, and the conversation is very different. So yes, so today's panel is all female, and it was very intentional. So if you don't have any more questions for the speakers, then my last question is really, we always talk about the problem all the time. And even with technology, because we don't understand it, sometimes we don't want to engage with it. But technology is not good or bad. It's how you use it is good or bad. So if we have to use and leverage technology going forward, given that as COVID has shown us, more and more of our work and our life will be spent online, what are the solutions that we can focus on so that we don't leave women and other vulnerable communities behind? Starting with you, Lauren.
Okay, thanks for that, Elsa. And I have thoroughly enjoyed listening to you and my fellow panelists, and I encourage others to put questions to us if you'd like. One of the things that strikes me that I have to pick up on again that Beatrice mentioned with regard to culture, and we're considering women, technology, and gender-based violence, is that culture has to do a tremendous turnaround. If we look at what's happened in the UK, for example, with the young woman, Sarah Everard, who was murdered it appears there's a police officer who's been charged with that. But the bigger issue than that is that when women took to the streets in the UK to protest this, they were being treated in a very, very poor manner. And then you have, adding to that, the Prime Minister of Australia made remarks that I know he intended to be positive, which turned out to be incredibly negative, by talking about the fact, well, at least here, a woman's not going to get shot if she's going to go out and protest. And so to me, that demands a huge cultural change. You know, there's been some discussion, and Elsie, you brought this up with me, about predictive policing and how that can be used with technology to benefit society. Now, for those briefly who don't know, predictive policing, and this can be used in the virtual environment as well as the real environment, is analyzing data in a manner that allows police to theoretically predict where crime might occur. It can be location-based or it can be person-based. So it's got a lot of potential, but as Napane mentioned also, she talked about AI, much like AI with predictive policing and leveraging technology to make our communities safer, we run the risk of what I call garbage in, garbage out. And if the information going in is already racially biased or ethnically biased or gender biased, the outcome is similarly going to be flawed. But I see great potential in partnering, as Elsa has done, with the government and with the corporate world in India, to leveraging those connections, and we get to educate each other. We still have to identify more men, and believe me, there are plenty of them out there who are willing to be our partners in this. And I think that creating partnerships with the private sector, government, and civil society through the use of technology, such as Safe City, really creates an environment to have a win-win situation for everybody. And that includes whether that's, as I said, a virtual environment or a real environment on the streets. But that's the only way forward, because nobody has the solution in and of themselves. And none of us, despite our commitment, our intellect, our networks, and our power, we can't fix it alone either. So to me, it's trying to create those partnerships from the ground level up, wherever we are, to start rebuilding the trust, because as Napane says, there's a huge trust deficit. And the only way we get past that is starting to talk with each other, and technology can be a part of that. And we look to and accept great technological ideas and solutions from civil society, and then build that into what goes on. And in my perfect world, Safe City data, that type of data becomes incorporated into predictive policing in a manner that produces a good result for everybody.
Yes, thank you for that. And, you know, for those people who don't know and not familiar with Safe City, we crowdsource anonymous stories. That means the power of the crowd. You use anonymous data sets with important information that is in a structured format. What happened to you? Where did it happen? Date and time and location. And this allows you to look at patterns and trends by location level. It's also available open source on the platform for people to use. This is not research data. This is actual evidence-based data, which is not available otherwise. In my country, India, if you wanted such data, you would have to make what is known as a right to information application at every police station, which is impossible. And you will still not get it at the granular level. And the pushback I always get is from, you know, nonprofits and women's rights activists who say, but you're not working on individual cases. There are many NGOs who do that. What we do is very niche, and we can support other NGOs with this data to amplify their own work and to make it more effective. Napinai, what about you?
There are so many powerful thoughts that have come in from Lauren and Beatrice today. I'm kind of overwhelmed. You know, there are so many possibilities. I'm just going to pick one thought, therefore, and work on it. Recently, I was invited to write a piece on online misogyny and hate speech. And the proposition that was put to me was, if we were to treat it as a hate crime, will it be a deterrence, better deterrence than just treating it as a regular crime or applying general criminal laws? And when I was doing the reading on it, one of the things that I came across is indeed in many jurisdictions where they decided to list gender also as one of the categories for hate crimes, they look at the commonality on why should gender be also a category to be included for hate crime. And that commonality is that whenever an established order is challenged. So, you know, when Beatrice talked about everything being a war, I was kind of reminded of the scene from the movie in the 1950s when the first African American girl went to school, right, in a common school. So that was also a war of sorts, the war against mental, makeups. So this is my point for today. One, there is a fear factor involved with men or with many people. Sometimes even women fear this change themselves, right? About change. They are very happy in their well-entrenched ways. It can be a mental, physical, virtual, everything, right? But they are very happy where they are. And when we ask for change, we are challenging that well-entrenched concept or a construct which they believe is already good and working. So if we talk about stereotyping roles at home, in an office space, etc., every single aspect of it comes with this backlash of well-entrenched roles. You also mentioned, Elsa, earlier about how women are still not being sufficiently within the workforce because of fear of harassment. The Sexual Harassment Act was brought in for that purpose in India. And before that, there was a Supreme Court judgment which laid down the guidelines in Vishaka's case. And yet there is such a decreasing statistics with respect to women in the workforce. One aspect, of course, is well-entrenched ideas. And the other aspect, and that's what I believe where a solution may lie, in terms of even the very valid issues raised about women and, men and participation. Whenever we talk about women's issues, we are always talking about the problems that women face in ensuring their equality or equal status. And as I mentioned in one recent session, equality is not about 50%. Equality is about getting whatever is our due. It could be 80% or even 100%. Because when men had 100%, nobody questioned their right to have it. So we are not talking about 50-50 here. It's about whatever is merited, right? But in doing that, if we are going to constantly talk about all the problems that women face, all the issues or concerns that impact women, we are going to get nowhere. Because the well-entrenched man, remember? So we really need to find that narrative which appeals to that lot, men, women, or any gender for that matter, which fears change. Put to them a proposition which appeals to them, which is to their benefit, because everybody looks for what is in it for me. So if we are able to put forth something which shows the benefit to them, then the benefit will automatically flow to us also as women. I think that is the ideal narrative which we need to look for, and I feel that's sadly missing, because of which today feminist or feminism is tagged as if it's a negative word. Anything that we speak about as women's rights looks as if it is just jingoism, right? So we need to change that and make it into a more equal narrative for equal rights.
Thank you, Napinai. And for everybody else, the Gender Alliance, which I mentioned earlier, includes a lot of men as well from around the world. And in fact, our next summit is going to be led by them because they want to design it to also attract more men to come to listen to these discussions. There seems to be like a barrier that men have. So to the point, and I put it in the chat, maybe each of us should bring a man to these discussions, because why wait for them to come organically? We need to force them to listen. And I think Fan Choi had her son listening. So thank you for that. Start them off early. Beatrice, over to you for the last view. What are the solutions going forward?
Yes, I was saying the beginning that I had two stories to share, and I want to finish with them because I think it's inspired me a lot, inspires me still, and I think it's a way of the path of the solution. Knowing that the solution is not gonna be a magic wand, right? It's gonna be a path. It's a journey that we are on. So I want to talk. I'm gonna be very briefly, and I'll say if I'm talking too much, you can really stop me because once I'm talking about the stories, I get. But I'm gonna say in 3 minutes, okay? I guarantee you. But I don't know if you know, but Argentina pro-choice movement called Marea Verde, which means green tide, was responsible for this great earthquake in Argentina that put put in the national agenda, if not the biggest taboo, Latin America, abortion. That was this was only possible because of the alliance between women elected and women from civil society. The women elected needed support from society to push the matter inside the Congress, and the civil society had, for the first time, a real opportunity to 40% of the Congress was women. That's why we had this opportunity. But one of the main protagonists of this movement were the young ladies. I mean, teenagers from 13 to 17 years old that were brave enough to start the conversation about abortion in their families with their grandmothers, mothers, aunts, fathers, grandfathers. And this wave got so big that they called Revolución de las Hijas, or Daughters Revolution. They organically were enabling a profound conversation and dialogue through affection. This is very revolutionary for me. And the fact was so strong that during the voting process inside the Congress, some politicians confessed to other politicians that they were voting pro-choice. Other way, my daughter will not speak with me anymore. Or I'm doing that because my granddaughter, sorry, my granddaughter asked me. And yes, Latin America, I don't know in other parts of the world, in Latin America, sometimes there is no boundaries between private and public. And this story touched me a lot because we can see what we need to stimulate. What we need is to stimulate a mechanism of change, not just a little piece here and there. And we need all of, like, we need a lot of people, and we need us all. We need allies, we need conversation, dialogue to reconstruct the social fabric. This is a way to stimulate this political imaginary where women are equal. So this requires time, strategy, and patience. It's a long run. And this is I love this story. And another story is, very quickly, what happened in Chile. I don't know if you know, but Chile will have, for the first time in the history of humankind, a constitution that people who is designing a constitution will be, half of them will be female. And that happened because women in Chile, in 2019, during the turmoil, that the social turmoil that happened there, the women they went to the streets for months, several months, and the protests became very violent, like between police and protesters. And the women, a group called La Tesis, this group of women artists, started to create a song and a choreography to during the protests, and that became, as you know, I'm sure you all know that, but that became a worldwide song and choreography. But that, I love that, because this is what I think is incredible, is to see women have their own we have our weapons to change the system. And it's not through violence, it's not through like pushing hard, yeah, but not pushing with violence, but it's pushing with um, with dialogue, with creativity, with empathy. So that is that's for me, that's the way we're doing in Latin America. Of course, we have backlashes because this is changing the system, and the system don't want change, but this is the way to go. It's creativity, united, and to reconstruct our social fabric through diversity and dialogue. That's the way I finish here. Thank you all
Thank you,
for this
Beatrice.
great morning.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And just to, our conversation on use of tech for gender-based violence at Grace Hopper, which was a tech conference, was all about empathy and how do you build it into the design of these applications. So we can go on and on, but we have to end here. I want to thank Lauren, Napinai, Beatrice for all their thoughtful and thought-provoking comments and insights, and all the lovely stories that you shared. Thank you so much. And also for those who put their thoughts in the chat section, I've also left my email there. Do reach out, and I'm happy to collaborate. Stephanie says, thank you. Okay, so feel free to put your emails in the chat section. So thank you very much. And I'm speaking at another panel later this evening, evening for me, but afternoon in New York. So see you there. Okay, bye everyone. Take care. Have a lovely day.